What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Nolecast. FSU's done with ACC Media Day, and practice starts in just a few. So I figured we'd do a little update. And hey, that's my buddy Chuck Blunt from Twitter, CBlunt58. Man, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
If y'all don't know, Chuck is really loves digging into data. Obviously, a diehard Noles fan, and somebody I like to chop it up with. And occasionally, I'll bounce the ball, be like, "Hey, am I crazy here?" And sometimes we're like, "Yeah," or "No," but I thought like a guy who has his own opinion is not afraid to to weigh in and data back. And I thought we had a lot of good questions this week in the mailbag, that sort of are data back. Not all. This may turn into Nerd Fest. I'm not planning it to go Nerd Fest totally, but certainly the numbers matter. And when you're getting your home loan, the numbers certainly matter. You want to call Chad Reasoner at Legendary Home Loans. Sorry, early. A lot of coffee today. Got both boys off to camp. 844-FSU-LOAN, 844-FSU-LOAN is the number to call. Obviously, just did a new one with Chad. Very, like always, satisfied there. And 600 Nolecast listeners cannot be wrong, I don't think, going with the legendary team. So make a legendary decision today. Let's actually start out with one from Chad, since he sponsors the show, and he did submit it. How much will portal transfers immediately impact the roster, and who will be the top 3 portal contributors? I like this one. Certainly a lot more on offense, which I guess in theory kind of makes sense because the scheme change is impacting. I think it's somewhat more drastic on offense than it is on defense. But that's probably true around college football. There's only so many different things you can do on defense because it kind of comes down to like height, weight, speed, and hustle. Offensively, there's a lot more room for creativity in college because of the hash marks, because of some of the stuff that teams will do with tempo, because you don't have $50 million invested in your quarterback. So for the most part, unless you're Lamar, you're not going to run them that much. So I think that kind of maybe offense can be a quicker fix with defense because everybody kind of wants the same dudes on defense in the portal because it's height, weight, speed, right? There's a little bit of fit, zone, man, corner, that type of thing, like 3 tech or a 0 maybe as a run plugger. But I know you had some pretty good data on the number of transfers who will start on offense or defense.
So it looks like we're going to have a few more than 11 because we have so many different roles within the offense. But you're looking at probably key contributors that would technically be starters somewhere in that 10 to 11 range. And outside of Jalen Lucas and Richie Leonard, they all came in this cycle, right? So you're asking guys who've been on campus since January, and in some cases maybe since the summer, to step into roles and be immediate contributors. So that kind of gives you that wide variance of what we could get, kind of like we saw last year. You hope it's going to mesh better than it did last year, but you are asking a lot of brand new guys to walk into a brand new system on top of that. And so it could be very combustible.
Completely. So who are your top 3 transfers for this team impact-wise? I'm curious to see if we have anything different here.
You need Castellanos to play well. He's got to be able to run the football. He's got to be able to hit some of those deep balls to Deuce. I would say Deuce is going to be big. If you want this offense to truly reach some of its potential, you have to be able to hit him on some of those vertical routes, 20, 30 yards down the field to get those chunk plays, because this offense isn't built to go 4 or 5 yards on 17 plays across 8 minutes to get a score. At least we hope not. That's not what we want. We need some quick scores. So I would say I'd put Deuce and Castellanos at the top on offense, and then pick an offensive lineman. I'd say the entire unit. I'm not as worried about the defense. I think you have bodies there. You have guys that have played well, and you know what the coaches are going to give you. But the offense is just such an unknown that all of my expectations and who has to step up are going to be on that offensive side of the ball.
I think I agree. If I had to pick a defensive transfer, and by transfer I mean just in this transfer class, not guys who are existing transfers, I think it's James, because I'm not really sure who else is going to rush the passer for you consistently.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I also think that Elijah Herring, with all the experience he brings, I think he can clean up some things that we haven't had in the linebacking core in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. He can kind of be an eraser if the D-line gets tied up a little more, and he has to prevent them from getting into the secondary. I think he could be a major impact there. So having a legitimate linebacker could make a big deal on this defense, even though it's a role that's been diminished both at the NFL and college level. He can be a difference maker, and we've seen that across the country. That if you have good linebacking cores, it can make your defense that much better.
For sure, and I think with Herring, there's a reason Tennessee didn't want to, pay him, but at the same time, like there's a level of play that can help you that is somewhere between a Tennessee team that thinks it's ready to win the SEC.
Right.
And Memphis is probably
second or third in the AAC, more than likely, right?
And probably the highest paying G5 team, I think, given the NIL money.
They're also the best with talent acquisition.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like I was talking to a coach at one of the G5 teams that is expecting to compete for the playoff yesterday, and he was like, "Yeah, on rev share, we're probably similar." On NIL, Memphis is probably killing all of us.
All that FedEx money.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, I think he can be a very, very useful player. Obviously, the corner from Houston could matter as well. I think on defense, and man, you got to stay healthy on the O-line for sure. Like that, that's I think the drop off there is substantial. But almost I don't hear a lot of podcasts out there like, we love our O-line depth in the portal era. Right. Guess what, guys?
Very few teams are built like Ohio State that could lose one or two starting offensive linemen and then swing a guard out to play left tackle, and you'd see almost no drop off. Like that just doesn't happen at 95% of the universities that play major college football. So
right. And I think there is a difference between, hey, like we are totally screwed if we lose somebody, and hey, we at least have the kind of bodies how they want to look. Now, they're inexperienced. They're probably too raw to not suffer some kind of drop-off. But realistically, yeah, like that is going to matter. I think on defense, when I look at this, like, man, you got a lot of good former 4 and 5 stars. Mm-hmm. And I shouldn't use the word good yet, but like former 4 and 5 stars, you kind of need them to like actually step up and play a real role. And it's both concerning and hopeful, I guess, at this point that we're not really sure who that's going to be. Like you recruited a bunch of blue chip DBs. Like we know since the recruiting services started insisting on verified data, right? And like not guessing anymore. Like let's use real track times. Let's use real 40 times that run on a laser at camp. And eventually the services get that data. Like 4 stars get drafted about a 25% rate now over the last couple of drafts. Like they convert to NFL out of high school, not the transfer stuff. Some of these guys have got to start waking up and being real players for you in year 2, whether that's Amari, whether that's some of the DBs, maybe that's a Nicholson who I know like his GPS stuff flashes. I don't know if like the instincts are there, but does that give you hope that like, man, there's at least some chance that 1 or 2 of these kids break out for this defense? And even if they're not projected starters now, like what are the odds that none of them hit?
It's got to be less than 10%, right? Somebody has to step up, whether it's Charles Lester or Kai Bates at the corner spot, or maybe Conrad Hussey finally has the light go on playing safety. Somebody in the back 7 you would expect to step up. I don't think you have as much true, legitimate blue chip talent in the front that's from high school.
Right.
And that's still a concern, though I think Kevin Wynn could take some snaps, and he physically seems ready to play at this level. But we know that it takes a lot for an 18-year-old to step in. Like Jernigan only played a third of the snaps in 2011, right? And he's a freak athlete. So asking Wynn to try to come in there and play 30 snaps a game probably isn't realistic, but you hope that you can build up his conditioning. He may not make an impact versus Bama or even up to the Miami game, but you're hoping when you get in deep into ACC play, he can spell Jackson and some of those guys and give you some legitimate reps without the quality of play falling off too far.
I totally agree with that, which kind of brings me to this question. When I was asking for mailbag questions, patreon.com/Nolecast, you can also hit us up, Twitter at Nolecast. On your preseason all ACC ballot, like first team, there are not many guys on this team who have done enough to be like, yeah, that guy on track record has earned it. But I do think there's a chance, like, does this FSU team have the largest gap between guys who should be preseason all ACC and guys who could, in theory, on measurables, body types, be postseason ACC? Like, I bet I'd be hard pressed to think of another team with a bigger spread than that.
Right. I think you got a couple on the D line that could be potential, right?
Yeah.
If Jason Jenkins plays up to his caliber, or if Jackson finally takes that step, I mean, he's got the body type. We just need to see it consistently day in and day out in every single game. Again, Elijah Herring has that potential. We know that he can produce at the linebacker spot. And then you could take Jeremiah Wilson or any of the guys in the secondary. Quindarius Jones is long, right? He could be a lockdown corner. And I'm not saying he's Xavier Rhodes, but he gives you that feel. The long arms, he's a tall corner, he's physical. If he locks down one side of the field, he could be a guy who commands some votes when we get into December.
Completely. And I'm glad you mentioned Jenkins. So I would say like the most newsworthy thing to come out of ACC is Norvell's positivity about Jenkins' rehab from his injury that he suffered before the spring. Mm-hmm. I would be surprised if he is back and impactful by the Bama game.
Right.
But you have two like absolute tomato cans after the Bama game. If you get Jason Jenkins back and he is able to give you, I mean, if I said, hey, Chuck, 40 good snaps from Jason Jenkins in a Virginia game, you're like, I'm taking that, right?
I'd even take that versus Miami. I'd use it like Fabo in 2023 when he came back very slowly. And I would just build his reps up because he's not going to have that conditioning. So it may only need to be 20 snaps against Virginia. But if you can get 40 from him in the Miami game, I think that should be the target. I think you can win the Virginia game without him, but you probably don't have a very good chance of shutting down that offense against that strong of an offensive line without him in the Miami game.
Agreed. I think Miami, not to just glaze Miami here, but like they probably have, they're in the conversation for the best line in the country.
Yes,
I think. Like
definitely top five.
Them, A&M, Notre Dame, Bama. Some people are going to say Florida, and I can't totally rule it out, but I'm not really sure. Like
Clemson's getting some love too.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The drop off between the fourth best O line you face and the fifth best O line you face on this schedule is fairly stark.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know who you think the fifth best O-line you play this year is, but it's probably
Pitt or Virginia Tech, right?
Yeah, maybe NC State, because remember Auburn took the Vatek left tackle, who was like, he's got a draftable grade on the pre-draft stuff.
Okay.
Speaking of draftable grades, I did get some questions about this from the last show, and I think that because of all of like the COVID kids we had, and all the extra years, and coaches tend to be a little more conservative in terms of like going with what they know as opposed to what could be. Mm-hmm. I think some of these draftable grade stuff have a little bit of a bias towards guys who have played, which that's kind of the case in any year, because how are you going to evaluate somebody who hasn't played at all? Mm-hmm. But I was looking at some of these charts yesterday, and somebody ran a nice, they graphed the number of top 1,000 prospects for the Shrine Bowl on the x-axis, and on the y-axis it was a preseason SP plus. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? Teams that are truly contending for the national title this year largely like sat out the portal relative to how much they dipped into the portal in prior years. And like most of the top guys in the portal this year that came from P4 were guys who the prior school elected not to pay.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that they're always going to suck or that they won't hit. Right. But this kind of goes back to our discussion of a minute ago. Like, yeah, there's a lot of unknowns on this team, but one thing is known is they do have a different level of height, weight, speed than a lot of the rest of the conference. Not everybody, probably not the top four you play. I wouldn't trade I don't think Florida, Miami, Clemson, or Alabama would trade rosters with the Noles. Right. But everybody else on this schedule probably would, right?
I mean, I think it actually looks like an upper half Power 4 roster again. Like, yeah. It was in 2023. You had some questions last year, and even in 2021 and 22, there were always some questions. They were a little undersized at some of the key positions. I think this one actually has the size in the trenches that you would desire, and you got the length in the secondary and guys that can move sideline to sideline at the linebacking spots. So, and then the skill position players, all for the most part, you would expect to see at a upper level Power 4 school. I felt like we had a G5 roster too often the last few years, especially last year. And I don't feel that same apprehension about the roster this year.
I think more of the transfers you took are at least proven. And if you get the floor from the transfers and you get the ceiling from some of your blue chip kids you signed, then I think you're cooking with gas.
Yes.
if you don't get the ceiling out of those guys, like if we get the kind of the negative tail outcome, then I'm a little more worried. But after listening to a lot of the coaches at ACC Media Days, I'm like, well, they got problems too, right?
Yeah. It's not just us.
Yeah, right, exactly. So let's kind of dive into this conversation. And this is actually not a mailbag thing. Well, it kind of is, because a lot of people followed up on my concerns about Tommy and my questions about Tommy, but also like I'm optimistic if Tommy buys into the role. Mm-hmm. Like, you got to realize, man, why did they go get you? It's the fit. And what makes the fit is your legs. And somebody jokes, like, sounds like he should go to running back camp the way you talk about him. And they're like, well, no, but I like, one of my concerns is some of these guys don't have much like self-awareness as to like what their ceiling is and and by that I mean Castellanos is not going to be drafted as a quarterback in the NFL. I don't care if he trains with Cam Ward's trainer for like the next decade. And that's fine that he can want to improve his passing. I think that's a good thing for the Noles. Like, what are we going to argue the opposite? No, he shouldn't try to improve his passing. The guy's like a 57, 58% passer, and PFF had him as the least accurate deep ball thrower, or like the most uncatchable balls. Like, that's, which I don't know if I always agree with PFF college. I kind of think if you're a good grader in PFF, you get moved up to the NFL team pretty fast. Some of these grades are a little, especially to do them that fast when you don't know the play call and you're getting them out like 10 minutes after the ball game. But there's room for improvement, certainly. My thing is, like, I listened to him in the Jeff Cameron interview, and I thought for the most part it was great. And obviously I'm friends with Jeff. I don't really like him still talking about going to the NFL. Like, dude, you are here to run. But also, and I'm throwing a lot at you. I want you to react to this a second. Sometimes in like the last 10, 12 years, the Noles have not always done a good job of taking the ACC slate seriously.
That's fair.
And Castellanos made the comments about how he's here to save jobs. And I wonder, like, do you, Tommy Castellanos, understand what will save Mike Norvell's job? Because I don't think it's beating Bama or not beating Bama. Now, if you beat Bama, that's going to probably go a long way. But, like, if you don't have a good outcome against Bama, does he have the leadership capability to say, hey, guys, we haven't won a damn thing here. We need to take care of business against Virginia, against Pitt. We need to not have a slip up against Stanford, which can happen. Now, Stanford's real bad. Like, they're an underdog to Hawaii to open up the year.
The only concern there is just it's a 10:30 kickoff traveling across the country. If you show up mentally ready to play, you should blow Stanford off the field. Do you know
who didn't show up mentally ready to play last year?
Miami.
Or
Louisville. Louisville, that's it.
They lost.
Miami and Cal was the one I'm thinking of.
Right. It's like, so this West Coast stuff is kind of a real concern when you have college kids. I really liked what I heard from Castellanos almost entirely. Like, the NFL thing, I'm like, you got to drop that, man. You're not getting drafted as a quarterback. Like, that's not, you don't throw the ball well enough to do that. Like, and he's shorter than Kyler Murray, and his numbers are like nowhere close. Kyler Murray, just to give you guys some perspective here, like, how good do you have to be to get drafted if you're like 5'9"? 260 of 377. That's 69% completions. And we got to be thinking that's probably some dink and dunk. Actually, not the case. 11.6 per attempt, 42 touchdowns, 7 picks. Like, okay, cool. Well, how about the running? Glad you asked. 140 for 1,001.
Wow.
Like, if you want to get drafted and have a real shot in the NFL, if you're like a 5'9" player like Castellanos is, that's not a jump that can be made. That's a much bigger jump from like where Castellanos is to where Kyler Murray was than like where JT was to where JT ended up, I think. Like, that extra jump is just not, I don't think that's possible. So, like, does he play within himself? Does he understand, like, if you're going to say, hey, I'm here to save jobs, understand what will save jobs.
6-2 in the ACC will save Mike Norvell's job and make a lot of people happy.
Absolutely.
And be competitive in those Bama and Clemson and Miami and Florida games. You don't have to even win any of them. We'd love to win one of them. But if you go 0-4 and you're competitive into the fourth quarter and 3 or all 4 of those games, and then you handle business, that's been one of my problems with Mike Norvell is too often they have played down to really bad competition. I mean, he struggled mightily against NC State. NC State doesn't recruit even in the same stratosphere as Norvell. Right. There's no real reason outside of focus and preparation to struggle with a team like NC State. The same could be said about the Virginia Tech game. Pitt, it's going to be about toughness, and we saw that even in 2023. That team shouldn't have been on the same field with that 2023 team, but Narduzzi has guys that will play really hard and really physical. So how are they going to be prepared for that game coming off Miami? But my expectation is 5-3 in the ACC. I expect a slip up somewhere, whether it's in Raleigh or it's against Va Tech, because you got somebody like Drones to deal with. But you should win at least 5, if not 6, of your ACC games, which means you're probably going to be 8-4. And it's not where FSU should be. But when you're coming off 2-10, a 6-game turnaround is massive.
Yeah.
So I think my one concern about him and his talk about the NFL, though, would be us FSU fans are a little gun shy because we've seen mobile quarterbacks over the last decade or so get a little hyper focused on moving to the next level, and they stop using what made them so dangerous and made the offense so hard to defend in the first place. Ponder stopped running in 2010. EJ stopped running in 2012. Even JT stopped running in 2023. We need Castellanos to still have that in his arsenal and not be like, I have to prove I can win from the pocket so that I can go to the next level. Just be the best college quarterback you can be and win as many games as possible. That'll matter more than how many passes you complete and your yards per attempt. Just go play football. That would be my biggest hope for Castellanos moving forward.
I agree. One thing I will say, as far as like, if you do get smoked by Bama, and I know the line's up to like 14 now, which is that's a pretty sizable line, and that's getting to the point where like, I don't know, man, like that. You got to be really clicking if you're Alabama, or you got to assume Florida State's a mess in week 1 to think they're going to cover that easily. Like games are just not played with that many possessions to go smoke people on the road. But obviously, like, FSU has a lot to prove, and I don't mean like, hey, they went 2-10 last year. There's a lot of new pieces that have to come together, and frankly, my concern with that would be the offense, because we know how little they actually got done in spring because of all the guys who were hurt. Like, how many days was the full offensive line that you would project to be the starters actually together in spring? I think 0.
Yeah.
So like, and there were many days where we had a lot of offensive linemen out with stuff. So how much did you really get done? How much have those guys worked together with the new scheme, with the new O-line coach? Obviously, Deuce got dinged up towards the end of spring. We know Squirrel White wasn't healthy, for most of spring. And that's a big question going back. If you have 2 legitimate receivers, then, okay, like, I know people in the SEC think FSU overpaid for Squirrel White, and they think Jenkins is a pretty good get if he's healthy. So just some opinions there from other folks I talk with. But if you get the positive end on Squirrel White and you get the kid you saw in the Orange Bowl against Clemson, well, then that kind of changes my opinion on this team a little bit. Or if Shady McCoy or Moore or one of those guys steps up for you on the outside. But I agree, it will come down to running the football. And I do hope that Castellanos plays within himself and doesn't try, hey, starting quarterbacks get $1 million if you're in Power 5 basically now. Like, bro, we gave you $1 million or whatever they gave, but I'm assuming it's somewhere around $1 million because of your legs.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't need you to try to become Kyler Murray because it ain't happening.
Right.
Kyler was very close to being like the number 1 overall recruit too. Like, that kid was insanely good at passing.
Yeah. If you get the 2023 version of Tommy, I think this offense could be a lot of fun and pretty dangerous. And you might spring one of those upsets if you get that version because he ran for 1,000 yards in 2023. Like, if you get that one that can run the ball 10, 12, 14 times in those bigger games.
If you told me,
I think that's going to be the key, his durability.
No doubt. Like, if you said, hey, Castellanos is going to play, if Castellanos plays 9 games against P4 teams, right? Because you're going to win the 2, Kent State and the other one regardless. I think if just games played might be the most important stat for him. Like, if he's starting and finishing games, I do have pretty good confidence that he's going to. Now, if he's like crazy hobbled or something, that'd be a different story. But I think you wouldn't really run him out there if he couldn't move because the arm is not good enough to justify doing so. But I do see some like real potential positive outcomes for this team if certain things go right. And I do think, like, having perspective if you do get smoked by Alabama, bouncing back, saying, hey, guys, like, we haven't won a damn thing yet. We went 2-10 last year. Let's go out and have a winning record in conference. Let's make a bowl game easily. Like not be sweating the Florida game to need the UF game to go make a bowl type thing. But that's kind of hard. It's one thing to say it in the preseason, but like in season, maybe it's easier to say after whatever happens against Bama happens.
Right. Plus, it's always hard. You kind of see it across the country when you're so portal heavy. You just wonder what kind of buy-in's going to stay with the team. Especially if you lose badly to Bama, and unfortunately, if you were to get blown out by Miami, I think that's where you just have to have a little concern. But hopefully that isn't the case. But it is something you have to keep an eye on, is what type of effort level do we see as you exit September, depending on what that record is.
From a like modeling and betting perspective, I have been thinking a little bit about some of like the tail outcomes for the teams who have a really hard start to the year across the country, who we know fully front loaded their deals. Because I wonder, like on a rev share basis, I mean, a lot of these kids are probably getting like $1,000 a week, right? But the front load was several $100,000 in most cases. Now, I know different teams have different contracts and things to, like if you don't show up to stuff, you get fined. Obviously, like certain schools don't actually have that yet, and they're scrambling to put that kind of stuff in. But I wonder about the quit factor for the teams that have the real hard start and they front loaded their deals. Because, man, if I already got $400K, do I really care about, $800 a week after taxes? It's not nothing. I should care, but will I? Will everybody care? Will the collective buy-in, to your point, still be there? All right, let me let's think Congruity here. Obviously, Congruity done a great job for us. Payroll, HR solutions, dipping their toe as well, having a lot of success with medical insurance now as well. So if you guys need health insurance, any of that kind of stuff, Congruity at congruityhr.com. We have 8 or 9 Nolecast listeners who have signed up their business with Congruity, and we've never heard nothing but great with them. So really excited to have those guys on board still. And got a lot of questions about tempo with Gus. A lot of the player interviews and some coach interviews have indicated, the increased tempo. Gus literally wrote a book on hurry up, no huddle spreads. A guy that has a lot of hurry up in his past. But you and I were chatting, and I think this is a really good point to bring up and to answer a lot of our listener questions. How much tempo do we think they're going to run, and maybe how much tempo should they run?
I think they'll run higher tempo in the games where they have a talent advantage, right? And that's what you should do. You should run tempo against a Virginia on the road and take advantage where you have bigger bodies and more talent. I wouldn't expect some crazy tempo against Bama, because all it takes is a couple 3-and-outs and you're on the road to getting blown out, right? Like, you have to pick and choose your moments. And I feel like Norvell's kind of done that in the course of his career, and so has Gus. Gus has used it to his advantage when he knew it was a real advantage, but it's not every single game I'm trying to run at breakneck speed. I mean, the data actually suggests he's more in that 40 to 50 range for his career as a head coach in terms of the pace he wants to play at. Even when you adjust for the new clock rules 2 years ago, he has stayed relatively in that 40 to 50 range most years. The one outlier at UCF was 2022, he ran 76 plays a game, which was third in the country. But we would also need to look at what that actual schedule was and why he ran. It may have just been a very, easy schedule that he could take advantage of a much wider talent gap than his opponents, right? So I just don't expect some crazy 75 plays a game type of thing. I think if we saw something in that 68 range, that would fit what Gus has done for his career, and then Norvell has been about 63 per game the last couple years since the new clock rules went into place. So we're only talking about 4 or 5 more plays per game, I think, would be my expectation for the season. Now, again, in those games where you have that talent advantage, you do want to push 72, 73 plays a game and try to wear them out as quickly as possible so that you can get your own starters out and rest up for the bigger games on the schedule.
So in looking at that 2022, so that was their last year or second to last year in the Big 12?
It was their last year. 2023 was their first year in the Big 12, so it was last year in the AAC.
Right, okay, so last year in the AAC. So They went, they go 8-5 that year.
Mhm.
So 81 against South Carolina State. I will say Gus will and love, like he's one of the OCs that loves to run it up like crazy on the bad teams. It inflates their numbers. It makes them look better as an OC. Doesn't mean he's not a good OC. I think he probably is a good OC, but like some of these guys, they like to keep the hammer down because they do care about their stats. And he is like, if you look at the tempo they pushed against Kent State in 23, guys, oh my God.
Week 4 should be fun then.
Yeah. And like, I bet you they score, if they don't score 90 in games 2 and 3 combined, I'd be pretty shocked.
Yeah. I would expect
Probably
something.
100.
They should probably break 50 against East Texas A&M, if not pushing on 60, and then you would expect 40 plus against Kent State.
Yeah, if you look at some of these metrics that combine FCS and FBS, Kent State is behind like 40 FCS teams.
Yeah.
So if they're not the worst FBS team, they're the worst FBS team that's not playing its first year in the FBS, I would say. All right, so 81 against South Carolina State, that's an FCS team. 72 against Louisville, they lost 14-20. 92 at FAU, 40-14 win. 73 in a win against Georgia Tech. That was that terrible Collins Georgia Tech team. So they won 27-10. 71 in a 3-touchdown win against SMU. 69 in a 70-13 win against Temple. This is kind of what I'm talking about. Like he loves to run it up. 69 in a 3-touchdown loss at East Carolina. That was crazy. They threw a ton of picks. I remember that game pretty well. 84 in a close win against Cincinnati, 25-21. 71 in a 1-touchdown win against Memphis. 84 in a 1-touchdown win at Tulane. 57 in a field goal loss at home against Navy. 76 in a 1-touchdown win at USF. And then 96 in a 45-28 loss in the rematch against Tulane in the American. That's the Tulane team that went on to play, I believe, USC, right, in the Cotton Bowl.
Yes.
Okay, so like a fairly good Tulane team, and then 71 in the bowl game in a 13-30 loss against Duke. I think Plumlee did not play in that game. So yeah, I am like clearly like they had a massive talent advantage or disadvantage when they got to the Big 12, as they found out pretty quickly. So. I mean, is 2022 more indicative? Because they're going to have a like mild to extreme talent advantage in probably 8 games, and then a mild to medium talent disadvantage in 4, I would say.
Yeah, I think the only thing we'd have to do is then adjust for the new clock rules, because 2022 was the last year of the old clock rules. So there's just less plays available. So if you were at 76 then, you're probably talking 70 to 71 in a conversion to today's game with the new rules. But yeah, I don't think it's crazy to think you could see him crank it up in those 7 or 8 games where FSU has a wide talent advantage. But I do think he's going to have to play it a little more conservative and a little slower in the other games. You hate to see them play to not get blown out, but you still you also don't want to destroy psyche, right? Like,
right, exactly.
Getting destroyed by Alabama is not good for your long-term health of 2020-25 mentally. So it makes sense to keep that in a 65 type of play target, I would say. So
then you have to run a bit of a balancing test. Like, does slowing down hurt the efficiency of the offense? Right? Like, is what you run partially effective because you are getting a certain number of, let's call them freebies or layups per game because the defense is misaligned? It's easy for a player, like Castellanos, who really struggled to read defenses at Boston College under O'Brien, less so in a system that was more tailored to him. Like if you're Norvell, right, you got to balance the psyche. Typically, Norvell has not always played to avoid getting blown out, right? I think like Norvell generally plays to win. And with a guy who has 55 million guaranteed on his buyout, there's no real reason for him to be like, dude, I'm trying to win ball games here, right? Like but I agree with you. The psyche aspect, you don't want the team to get rocked and lose the team.
Is it as simple as how effective they are at just standard run? Like, can they just, because like last year, right? They were getting hit before they even got back to the line of scrimmage more often than not. If they can just erase some of that and consistently pick up 2, 3, 4 yards a carry, like more often than not, and not have those losses, I think then that dictates some of the tempo you're going to run. But if you're first down and now it's 2nd and 14, there's no point in running tempo if that's going to be your standard, right? But if it's consistently 2nd and 7, 2nd and 6, now you do probably want to pick up the pace some and take advantage of some of that, because you will have the defense on their heels and you're operating in good down and distance for your own offense.
I think that's fair completely. Like, so in some ways, the choice is not totally Norvell's. It's dictated by your success rate on standard downs. Yeah. No doubt about it. I am not opposed to tempo, especially if you think it improves your efficiency. And I think under Gus, he probably would tell you that it does. The only thing I don't like about some of these tempo teams is I don't always love how they play like end of half situations, because like if you have to go fast to be efficient, sometimes that is going to lead to the opponent getting the ball back with a little bit too much time.
Mm-hmm.
Now Norvell has generally been good about understanding how to play, like in basketball terms, a 2-for-1 to end the half when it comes to like, when do I, some of these people hate the punt and then go decisions by him. And I think the people that do, either they hate it because they don't understand math, or they hate it because, as your point, like the psychology aspect of the defense. And I think it's kind of crazy to just be like, oh, like stats nerd and like doesn't matter at all. Like I think it matters some.
Yeah.
How much you quantify it, I don't know. Like that's kind of hard. But when I think about this, like, if you're Gus, you're just the OC now, man. Like, I'm not saying you don't care about winning, but like you care about scoring points.
Yeah.
So how much does Norvell really let Gus run his stuff at the tempo he wants to run? And how CEO is Mike, where he's like, hey, actually, we got to pull back on this, or we got to press this, and defense. Like, if you want a positive out of this, I think you can read into the Arnett hire a little bit. Arnett is a guy with some of the blitz stuff, especially because I have some real concerns about pass rush on this team, in like non-blitz pass rush specifically. Because James is kind of got to be that guy. Otherwise, unless Amari's going to emerge and be a beast in year 2, which, hey, I mean, the kid advanced a grade, which our early data 24/7 says that's a terrible idea. You should not go early to college. Like those kids bust at a really high rate. But that doesn't mean Amari's guaranteed to. Hopefully, maybe he just is delayed in the development stuff. But in hiring Arnett, and I'm rambling here, and I apologize. In hiring Arnett, like that's a guy that likes to blitz a lot. If you look at what they said at Mississippi State, like this makes a lot of sense for him to be opposite of Mike Leach, because he's going to get the ball back to the offense fast, either by a touchdown allowed or a sack, turnover, etc. That's a guy I think you pair with a real fast-paced offense. I don't think I would pair Arnett with like an Iowa-style offense.
No.
That you kind of more of a slow bleed, play your in a game leverage situations type stuff. So maybe Mike is going to let him do what he thinks is best for the offense, which is probably why you hired the guy, right?
Yeah. And also, I think one thing we'll want to look at, you brought it up before, the success rate. When Gus was at UCF, his average success rate on standard downs is about 45%, which ranks in the top 30 nationally over that period. So that's what we're going to look for. Like 1 out of every 2 plays, you're expecting them to win on those standard downs and be in the good down and distance situations where the whole playbook's available. And if you want to crank up the tempo, you have that ability, because you just can't do it in 2nd and 14, but you absolutely can in 2nd and 7.
Completely agree. All right. So we have some more stuff here. Do want to, of course, thank our friends at Madso Township. Matt Thompson does such an awesome job. Like the whole For the Table restaurant group is just awesome. Cannot wait to get up there. I'm going to go to Florida State, Bama. So, pop into Madso, pop into Township, and heard CBS is doing a little something up there. So I'm hoping we can the whole crew could pop in as well. It'd be really fun. So we have we went over the Tommy, like, hey, it's cool to talk about the NFL, but you need to play within yourself and actually play the way justify the reason why they paid you to come here, which is for the most part the legs. Who would we put on the ACC team? I think we talked about that. What's your floor ceiling split on this team? That was one we got. I thought was interesting.
Personally, I have it. I'd say 9-3 is the realistic ceiling. That's what I have. Like my numbers run that out. I count anything with a 5% probability of happening as a realistic ceiling or floor. So I got 9-3 at about 6%. of the outcomes, and 5 and 7. I have a very short range, but I can understand anyone who says that this could go from 10-2 to 4 and 8, especially because a model can't account for, I hate to say it, quit factor or momentum, right? Like, people can argue that it doesn't exist, but if you were to beat Miami, there's a very real chance you're 7-1 going into the Clemson game. Then, if you were to beat Miami, like, that is momentum. That all of a sudden changes what the ceiling is, and 10-2 is very much on the table. So, yeah, I wouldn't argue with anybody that says a 10-2 ceiling and a 4 and 8 floor, but I wouldn't go wider than either of those.
I think I agree with you there. I mean, there's like stuff you would actually feed into your model is not going to produce anything wider than those bands that we discussed. And mine doesn't really either. I know Rufus Peabody has done some work on modeling QB uncertainty as it relates to injury in the NFL. And if you wanted to apply that to this schedule, I think that would yield some interesting results. It could also yield some interesting results on the negative end with your quarterback, who you're going to have to run quite a bit. But on the positive end for FSU, I got to say this carefully because I don't want it to come off bad. On the high win end of the modeling, if you were to use some of this for the guys who have already had an injury history, obviously Carson Beck at Miami is coming off do you have Tommy John surgery, right? Yep. Like the UCL. We've already seen DJ Lagway not participate in spring due to the shoulder, and shoulders are kind of tricky. They're much trickier than elbows typically. And he's already in a boot. Now, look, I mean, I think if he stays fully healthy, Florida is an interesting bet at anything more than 60-1 for the national title, because I do think that kid is like Ben Roethlisberger when he's healthy, but he's got to be healthy. Like the drop off there. Remember, Florida doesn't really love their backup. They wanted Deshaun Purdy, who the whole there was some weird stuff that went on there. He ended up going and he's starting most likely for Wake Forest. So the drop off at quarterback for the Gators is probably a lot bigger than they wanted it to be from starter to backup. So if for some reason Lagway didn't play in that game, or if Beck did not play in that game, and listening to a lot of the Miami podcasts, they certainly don't think next year's starter at Miami is on the roster this year. So when you factor that in, it's like, okay, those are two teams who you are projected to be an underdog. And if they don't have their starting quarterback, it kind of is a whole new ballgame. Doesn't mean they turn into a slam dunk category, but it's much more winnable if you don't have an NFL quarterback on the opposing sideline, or maybe on the sideline, not in the game. And I think the downside, obviously, like we talked about, and something I have a little bit of fear about, but not a ton, is if you get smoked by Alabama, you're going to win the next two. Doesn't matter. But if you lose that Virginia game on that Friday night, and you're sitting there at 2-2, but 0-2 in FBS, and then Miami comes to town, and that doesn't go well, and then you're right in the pit. Okay, that's a physical game. And then you got to go travel to Stanford. I mean,
I think Virginia through Stanford is the most crucial point of the whole schedule.
Yes,
because it's okay to lose to Miami. You'd rather not get blown out, obviously, and you would love to win, but you can't let the Virginia, Pitt, and Stanford games derail the entire season, and they very much can, right? If you were to, you come off a second loss at Miami, and then you go out to Stanford and you're just asleep because it's a 10:30 kickoff, the whole season can spiral very quickly with the way November sets up. I mean, it's not crazy to suggest they might only win one game in November. Clemson, Vatech, at NC State, and Florida is just not an easy road for anybody that is not a championship contender. So, I mean, I'd have great concerns if they drop one of those games around the Miami game that you may have to worry about a quit factor, or just I'm looking out for me to make sure I get out of this season healthy type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Or the guys who have an extra year left, hey, they start
thinking, hit the portal.
Right. Yeah. And that is, to be clear, not an FSU specific concern at all. FSU falls into that category, but that's a concern of staffs across the country for sure, especially ones that don't have stuff built in the contract about hey, if a guy misses a meeting, we can fine him $3,000, stuff like that, which certain schools do have. And I think that'll become more prevalent unless the NCAA says they can't do it, which I very much doubt they're going to tell the schools that. Maybe a court might, but probably not that. Let me see what else we have here. Portal stuff we already went over pretty much. We talked about a lot of the Gus stuff. Look, my group chat blew up about like, dude, is Norvell still doing this like, televangelist revival preacher thing? And I was like, I don't have enough energy to like get fired up about this. Like, I thought it's a little bit weird for a while, like that he's always like that's the gear he shifts into it, like most of these big booster events. Not in the small private settings as much, thankfully, from what I've heard. But the guy's owed $50 million. It doesn't matter. You win games, cool. If you don't, you don't. Nobody's like, all right, I don't know, man. Like, he went 7-5. Let's flip Alfred's like, let's flip a coin. I don't know. He does yell a lot and gets into this like preacher mode. I don't think it's a little weird at this point, but does it matter? I don't know.
I don't think it does. I just go out and win football games, and if they make a bowl, I would say more than likely he's safe. I'd hate to see them go 6-6. I mean, you go 4-6 against FBS or like real competition, but also when you look at that schedule next year, it's kind of like Billy in Gainesville last year to this year. If you already have that schedule, do you really want to set the new guy up for failure anyways? Because next year's schedule is not it's not like this one, that's for sure. I mean, you add Notre Dame also out of conference, and you're at Tuscaloosa against Bama. It's a brutal schedule next year. I think as long as Norvell makes a bowl, he's going to be the coach in 2026 at minimum.
Also, like, where's that buyout money coming from? I think it's vitally important that Norvell has at least a decent season, so you're not having to borrow money from somebody you may not want to be in business with long term to pay a buyout.
Or tapping into your leaving the ACC money.
Yeah, like, I don't think they just have that sitting. They have it, but like, I don't think they really want to tap into this. And I do think it's different than we were saying this about Taggart. They certainly didn't want to have to do that, but obviously, like things got bad enough that they felt they had to. But now you'll be paying like successive buyouts, and that is much more difficult. Like, you didn't have to pay a buyout for Jimbo. You did not have to pay a buyout, not a real one, for Bobby Bowden, right? This is different, and the money could be used in a lot of different areas, for sure. I think that's pretty much it. Let's see if any more came in. I know we both got to jump and get roller. So I've enjoyed this, man. I really appreciate you jumping on.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it too.
What players must stay healthy outside the O-line and D-line? Can we also exclude quarterback? Because that's just, I feel like we're going to agree. Like, it's important the quarterback stays healthy. Yeah. Are there any players, if other teams lose to injury, that could benefit FSU in their matchups? I think we already covered that really with the Lagway and Beck thing are the two most.
For
most
FSU,
likely.
I would say Daryl Jackson and Lions. You just don't have a lot of proven in the middle behind those. As is, you're already expecting Kevin Wynn to step in and play some snaps as a true freshman. So I'd say Jackson and Lions, you really need them to not get banged up. Kind of reminds me of 2010 when we only had Ant McLeod and Everett Dawkins. And then I think it was DeMonte McAllister was the third D tackle. You just don't have any depth. And we saw what happened to that team down the stretch.
Dawkins was gone, right? And you had Jacob McDaniel.
Dawkins was still there through 12, but they got so banged up that like that Va-Tech game, Va-Tech just kept hammering the middle because there was just nothing left in them. They had played so many snaps throughout the year. And so that's kind of the same problem this year. You don't want Jackson and Lions to get banged up, and because you just don't have anything behind them that's proven can play enough snaps at this level.
Are you concerned that Pittman is likely to start at tight end and not Landon Thomas?
Well, I think Sonone put it well that they're almost two different positions, because it seems like Pittman and Lofton are going to play more of an H-back, while it's going to be more Landon Thomas and Biscuit playing the actual inline tight end role. So I don't really think there's a whole lot of overlap between the two.
I think that makes sense. I would be concerned if Landon Thomas is not getting like at least a couple hundred snaps. At that point, I'm like, dude.
I actually was a little concerned that Sonone moved him to the second team tight end behind Biscuit. And I guess that's more because it's going to be so run heavy that you want that bigger body. I mean, because Biscuit's almost like a small offensive lineman anyways. So and maybe that's why Sanone's reasoning. I didn't dig deep into that, but I would hope that in passing situations, if we're going to use a real inline tight end or even flex one out, that you would have him out there along with maybe Pittman somewhere motioning out of the backfield across the formation or something.
I mean, if you're paying that kid what you're paying him, and he's not playing like at least 400 snaps, you should be looking to get out of that deal. Like that's not an optimal outcome. Like that's how an NFL team would think. Like we're not paying, like tight end is a non-premium position. It just is. Even your highly rated tight ends, tight end is the worst evaluated position by all the services because they're almost always kids who grow later. A lot of these kids are growing at 21, 22 years old. So what you do, and a lot of them are actually big receivers in high school who end up just putting on mass or basketball kids or something else. So that's why I'm kind of the opinion a lot of these top tight ends are oftentimes a little more maxed out, or at least historically. And I think some of the tight end recruiting rankings, I think they're trying to change to reflect that. Like, hey, make sure like the kid who's a good tight end in high school, he better be like freaking Brock Bowers if you think he's kind of maxed and yet it's still going to go somewhere. I think that's pretty much. Last one here. We'll get out. By the way, we need to talk about this. The Tampa Seminole Club is we actually have an awesome deal with them on the kickoff. I'm going to go be down there with Graham. Club kickoff. Get the exact time here. I need to text Mike. All right, It is the weekend of the 9th and 10th. I will be down there in Tampa. We had an awesome time last year in Ybor, and I'm super excited about it. So we'll be down there on August 9th. And what is this at the same? It is at the same place. Cool. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. And 2 to 6 p.m. last year we had a great time and pretty cool little pub crawl afterwards as well. And as you can hear my voice, I'm a little more positive on this team after hearing some of the concerns from some of the ACC guys at ACC Media Day. So last question, get you out of here. Who is a player, non-quarterback, from a prior Noles team that you would want on this squad?
Tim Jernigan. Give me a trench guy all day, every day. Give me somebody in the middle that can command a double team, whether it's Corey Simon, Tim Jernigan, somebody like that. Just somebody the offense has to account for on every possession that can throw off timing, can make the center snap it great, especially with all the shotgun snaps these days. Like dealing with somebody like that across from your face is just a game changer. I mean, we've seen it throughout the years. I would always take a trench guy over anything else.
I agree with you. My standard answer to this question is always you got to pick a position that is a strong leak position as opposed to a weak link. And by that, I mean like your O-line within reason is kind of as good as your worst guy. Your D-line is sometimes as good as your best guy, or at least because that screws everything else up. Receiver is a strong link. Like I don't love to hear they're real deep at receiver. They don't really have a true number one. I'm like,
that's a problem.
Right. Quarterback there's no strong or weak link. It's just one guy. So yeah, I think D-line would certainly be my answer because you don't throw the ball that much in this offense, and you certainly don't spread it around a whole lot. And like we know, Deuce, when healthy, had a very strong spring. So yeah, D-line for sure.
I'll throw out one hypothetical on offense though.
All
Dalvin in a Gus offense.
Phew.
Given we know that Gus will ride a running back when he has somebody who he can trust. Dalvin, I mean, think of 15 and 16 Dalvin. That version of him running behind this type of scheme could be a lot of fun. I mean, he could go for 2,200 yards.
How many carries would Gus give Dalvin?
25 at minimum.
I mean, I think he would get 300 touches.
Yeah.
Like not what was he did to Ashton last year. You know, Ginty touched the ball he rushed the ball 374 last year.
That's 1990s running back numbers, back when it was one workhorse type of guy.
That's 81 more than Cam Scatterbo.
That's crazy.
At Arizona State. Yeah. The only other kid over 300 carries last year in the country was the quarterback, to give you a hint.
A quarterback?
Yeah.
Oh, God. P5 or G5?
G5.
G5. Oh, probably Mensa didn't carry it a ton, did he?
No, Bryson Daly at Army.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I should have known a military academy would be up there.
Awesome, man. I really enjoyed this, and we'll check in with you guys next time. Graham will be back. I know we're also having a little preseason Nolecast meeting in New York, and we'll check it back in soon.
Bye, bye.